In a previous video, I was looking at recent changes in Sozi and how it can be used to create engaging and eye-catching presentations. In this video, I will share the steps and processes I've used to go from design assets to final design and onto animating the design in Sozi. So this is by no means the definitive way to create a presentation in Sozi. It's a process I came up with based on my use of the older version of Sozi. I knew that each group of elements that I'd want to animate would need to be on their own layer. I knew that each layer can be manipulated separately in Sozi, and that I previously managed to lose track of individual layers while setting up a scene in the presentation. So let me take you through the process I took, and we'll discover a few extra features that I could have probably found out in the manual, but that have nevertheless made my life much easier. So here we have the final design. You can see that there's a A4 document here, which will be able to be exported. This is kind of the cheat sheet that will accompany the talk. This will be available for anybody to download. For those who download it and haven't seen the talk, there'll be a link off here to a version of the talk that will talk them through each of these flows. On the right hand side, we've got a whole load of assets that will be used within the presentation, but won't be part of the final PDF export. So in order to create a layer structure that will allow us to easily use this in Sozi, I added each of the layers of each of the assets on the right there into their own layer so that we can scale and move them independently. We've also got the header and footer, which are in there separately, so that we can take those out and move them around. And then we've also got the frame, we've got the title, and we've got the subtitle. So these are all elements that can be used within the Sozi presentation, but aren't necessarily part of the flow. Now the flow of the talk, there's going to be a number of slides, and I thought if this is going to be a standard slideshow, I'm going to go through a process where I introduce each line and each flow in one time. So if we have a look at, for example, go down to the device flow, which is the first one at the top here, we've got all of the entities involved in that device flow in one of the elements, in one of the layers, which allows us to control those as one group. And then we've got each line, each flow in its own layer as well. This means that when I want to bring device 3, this line here, which has got the number 3 and the arrow on it in, I can control device 3 as a layer separately in Sozi. So let's start Sozi. And the first thing it asks us is to open an existing SVG file. So in the recent documents we can see this is the one that was just edited. We open it up and we have the SVG file document as saved before. Now on the left here we can see all of the layers, and we can also start adding new frames. So let's just go through and add all of the layers to the timeline so that we can manipulate them separately. So now we have all of our layers here, and if we scroll down we can see them all in the order that they appear in the SVG document. This means that the layering what's above the other will still take effect. The first thing that I thought would be useful, I'm going to hide the default layer because we're not going to use that one, but we're going to have all of the other layers here visible. So the visibility on those, you can see that some of these here are selected. We can unselect those. First thing I thought would be useful is to create the end view. So manipulating this is going to be a little tricky in terms of if I started zooming in and moving around the auth code flow and then had to try and incorporate everything else in, I figured it would be good to start with an end view first. So we'll add a frame, and we'll come over here and we'll rename this frame to end. And then just by clicking on the label here, it selects every element in here. So now when I come in and move, it's actually moving every single element. If I only had the frame selected, then it would only move the frame. Just undo that. So I'll select everything, and then I'll decide what I want the end frame to look at. Before I actually go ahead, I'm going to change the aspect ratio here to 16:9 or 16:9, so that we have the presentation aspect ratio that I want for the end. Now I want to end up with the auth flows over on the right hand side here, and then some information on the left, which is the thank you stuff. So let's just go down to the bottom here, and I'm going to deselect the assets. So that's these aspects on the right here. So now I should be able to move that separately. So that looks good. So I'm going to come over here, and then I'm going to rotate. Now with rotate I can use the shift key. So I'm going to stay on there. I'm going to use shift to rotate slightly. I'm going to move that over there. Let go of shift, we'll move it in slightly. And then to resize or zoom we can use the alt key. So I'm going to use alt and then click and drag I'm going to make that a little smaller and then move that over, use shift again to straighten it up a little, and I think something like that. And then we'll come down to the bottom here, and there's an item here called cheat sheet URL, so that's this one here. So I'm just going to move that. In fact, I'm just going to bring all of these over so they're visible, so we can play with those. Alright, let's move back to the cheat sheet. So I want to move this over here and then rotate that round so it's about parallel with the text and put it on top, maybe in the middle. So that's going to be a reference to everybody being able to download the cheat sheet. Then we've got my logo. Let's plonk that down here. We've got the Auth0 logo, which I'm going to put over here. I'm going to take my name, the social media Twitter handle thing, and the thank you. Now this is more important, so I'm going to make this one bigger. What was bigger? Bigger was Alt. So let's make that big. I'm also going to rotate it slightly, stick that in there, and then put my name, make that a bit bigger. Maybe rotate that one. And then the social media one, make that bigger as well. Put that one in line over there. Okay. So this isn't the final version. I've actually got another document I've been working on, but that's the kind of thing we can do to create the end. Now let's just have a quick look before we switch to my working version, what we can do to then create the other steps. So the next processes that I had was to create the major stop points. So I want to add a layer. Now I want to add a frame. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change this one to be, let's have a look. So the auth flow one, or the device flow, is the last one that I want to show on. So the way that I want to give my presentation is start with auth flow. That's probably one of the more common ones. Then we'll have a look at implicit flow, go on to auth code with PKCE, look at client credential flow, and then finish with device flow. So device flow is the one before. So we're going to rename this one device, and the last frame here is 7. So we want the 7th frame to be the closing of the device flow view. So what we want to do is we want to move all of these off the screen. We'll want to remove the frame and the headers and the footers. We'll want to be zoomed in on the device flow area. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the assets on the left there, and I'm going to move them off screen. But before I do that, I'm selecting the end column, because over here I can now unlink from the previous frame. Currently they're linked. If I click on that, you'll see an extra line comes in. So now I can move the element here, and when we go to end, it'll migrate back to where it was. So that's the animation component of it. So I'm going to come in here and just select all of these now. So for the device 7 frame, I want all of those to be invisible. Right, now let's come back up to the top, and we'll take our frame, title, and subtitle, which are those components. We also want the header and the footer, so that's that entire part there. I'm just hitting Ctrl-Z there to undo my last move, so I'm just moving them around to make sure I've got the right element selected. I'm then going to unlink them from the previous, and now I'm going to select the way I want it to look in device 7. So header I'm going to move up, footer I'm going to move down, frame I'm going to zoom right in on, so now it is invisible but it's surrounding the document. Title I'm going to move over this way, and then so rotate that around, and subtitle I'm going to move the other way and move that over here. So what this does is if I now click on end, you can see all the elements coming together, and it's like all the components are coming together to meet to create a final document. It's hard to see the animation on the title and the subtitle, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change over here the title to use an ease out, so it'll be slower towards the end, and subtitle will also ease out, so it'll be slower towards the end. So now when we bring it in, you'll actually be able to see that movement, not so much of the header still. So let's just grab that header, and I'm just going to move it down. Can't see what I did because it's off to the left there, but but I just dragged and moved it down. So now we should be able to see it moving. I'm just going to grab that title again and move it. So there it is. I'm going to move it down so it's approximately there now. So now we've got more of an arc. There we go. We can see that element coming in and out. So we've got a nice closing slide there where it says, thank you very much. Here's all the information you've just seen. It's in this form and you can download it. So that's the final version. Now I need to zoom in on the device itself. So what I'm going to do is I've shown you how to unlink certain frames from others. In most cases, we're going to find that every single frame is going to require every element to be moved or shown or hidden or something in some way. So from here on in, I'm going to cheat slightly. So I'm going to select the whole column this time, and I'm going to unlink all of those. So there's now no link at all between any of the fields, the layers and the frames. So I'll do that from now on. So let's go back and have a look at slide device 7, and I'm going to make sure I've deselected all of the components except what we're looking at here. So let's take out frame, title, subtitle again. The rest of these are going to stay in, and we don't want header, footer, or any of the assets. So we'll take those out. So now we just have all of these selected here. If I move that, we can see that's just everything. Undo that again. So now what we want to do is zoom in so that we've got the final view of what device flow looks like. So this is the 7th flow step. So if I just control, actually I'm just using my scroll wheel. So if I use shift and just twist that around, I want to try and get everything in while hiding most of the other stuff around it. We'll have done the client credential stuff already, so the viewers in the audience will have seen that. But I think let's just zoom in a little more. Okay, so we've got the identity manager here, our fridge, the mobile device, and the API that the fridge wants to connect to. And this one here is the 7th line, so 1 through 6 are the device flow processes, and then the 7th step that we'll show is the fridge using the access token to access the API itself. So we're now in a position where we've got device 7. So now let's jump in, add a new frame, and we'll move on to the next major point. So we've done device. The next one's going to be client creds, and it's called client creds 3. So while this one's still selected, I'm just going to de-link it from the previous slide, and we're then going to rename this to client 3. And we can now deselect these items here again. We don't want to move the frame title or subtitle, and we also don't want to move the header, footer, or any of the assets. And we come across to client credentials flow there. I'm just going to rotate that. Actually, I quite like that rotation. It fits a lot in while being at the maximum zoom. Now at this point here, in the future, we'll be able to hide device flow altogether because the elements, in fact, we should probably do that now. So by the time we get to the end of client 3, we don't want device flow to be visible. In fact, we're probably going to, let's wait until we've got device 1 in, and then we can hide device flow before client 3 finishes. So we've got client credentials flow, that's a major stop point. The next one after client credentials is auth pkce 4. So let's add that, delink that, rename this auth pkce 4, deselect the elements we don't want to move. There we go. And now we want to move over to see auth pkce, which is this one here. I'm going to rotate that up. Let's leave it something like that. Move that up a bit. It doesn't matter that we're cropping up implicit flow because that would have been covered already. So we really only want to focus on this part here. So that's fine. Now let's add another one before, and we'll delink. You'll notice that because I've still got these selected here, when I add a frame, it's automatically keeping those selected. So now I can unlink those and come through. It doesn't matter that these don't move here because the frame, the title, and the subtitle are going to be the same for all of those. In fact, we could even link these back to those in the future if we wanted to. but this is making it easier for me to see which layers I need to deselect, which is nice. I don't think that's an intended part of the UI, but it's working for me. So we're now looking at auth-pkce4, which is actually going to be the next step, which is implicit flow, and it's implicit 2. Implicit 2. So now we can come in. I'm going to rotate that ever so slightly and zoom in a little. So there's implicit flow 2. And now I'm going to come in and add the final, not the final, but the final flow, which is going to be auth code. I'm going to create auth code 9. So let's just delink, come in here, change that to auth code 9, and then we'll deselect these. And auth code is over here. We'll probably want to twist it around that way. And now let's start making the lines show and hide. So the 9th line up here is the one that goes from the server to the API. We want that one to only be visible when we get to auth code 9. So on auth code 8, we're going to select the auth code 9 layer. And we're going to go into crop mode. And this line here, we're just going to crop the top out of. So the animation will then go to include that. That looks good. So now we'll add in auth code 7. The difference between auth code 7 and 8 are that 8 will come into effect. So in auth code 8 here, we'll delink the previous frame. We'll come in here, we're in crop mode already. Line 8 is over here, so we want to drag from the arrow end back to the beginning. And we can see now that line 8 will disappear when we're looking at auth code 7. And we'll add in auth code 6. And I'll just whiz through these now. So auth code 6 on layer 7. And we want to, 7 is this one here, which goes upwards. So we'll drag it from the top down. 7 disappears. Okay, so we've now got an opening slide at the beginning, which is currently an exact copy of the auth code start. And I've got auth code start through to auth code 9 here that will introduce each of the lines. So lines 1, line 2, lines 3 and 4, all the way up to line 8, and then line 9, which actually zooms out slightly so you can see the API connection at the top there from the server. I've created this opening slide because I want a keyframe to start with, so that when I start reconnecting some of these over here, in order to move elements we don't want to see just yet out of the way, that it doesn't break things. So I called it opening. There's a useful couple of other things over here. You've seen me unlinking the previous frame. There's a way of removing all the clips on the screen in one go, so I'm going to do that. So everything's now visible in that first frame. And then there's a reset layer geometry. What this will do is take you right back to the original layout in the SVG that we had at the beginning, which is this part here. And then the rest of it, I'm going to show this, the download cheat sheet we don't want. So let's just get rid of that one, move that out there. The rest of it, I'm just going to select everything and then deselect the usual suspects. I'm just managing the clouds and lines and icons. So this area here, I think it'd be nice to have some kind of visual of what's going on. I don't know, I think what I'll probably do is get rid of everything except the clouds. So that's going to be the, they're going to be part of the entities. So let's get rid of that one. I don't want to select that one. I don't want to move those. I don't want to move that. I don't want to move that. So that should now just be the lines, not including the clouds. Yes, so I'm going to move those all off screen. I don't want to see those. Now I'm going to have to crop each of these separately because I don't want to see the other icons around there. So let's come in and have a look at this one here. That's that one there. So let me come in and crop Well, I'll make it a bit bigger to start with. Why is it not cropping? Select crop. I'm going to come in and crop this out. Hopefully they're all in places that will allow me to crop it. Lovely. Unfortunately, you can only do a square crop, so if any of these had bled into areas, then we would have had a bit of an issue. But we've got our device flow. Let's just zoom that in a bit further, like that. And then I'll just crop that. Great. And then let's come in and have a look at the title again. Let's make that bigger. And the subtitle. There we go. So I don't know why that text is selected there. I'm just going to close Sozi and reopen it to stop that being the highlight. I'm not sure how else to do it. So we're back, and that's been de-highlighted. So now, if we come into the first frame here, we want all of this stuff over here to be hidden. So that's all of the stuff under implicit and auth pkce. So let's grab these elements here, and we're just going to move them off to the side. So now they're not visible. We'll just step through a few of these to make sure that should all be the same, all the way to auth code 8. When we go to auth code 9, now we can still see them there because they have the new keyframe here. So I'm just going to go in again at this point here and grab implicit. All of those, and move them out again. There's something else hiding down here. That's going to be the cloud for implicit entities. We also want to move that one out of the way. So now between here and here, we still can't see anything else. That's come in. We do have number 9 here of the device flow. So let's drop down to device 7 rather of device flow. So let's come down there and move that out. So now all we can see there is the auth code related information. Now because there's a break here, all of the changes I've just made on the next frame won't be there. So when we go to implicit start, everything's now in the right position again. If I mouse over, you can see the hidden elements and they're all in the right place. So this time I want to move away all of the lines to do with the auth flow, and I also want to hide the lines to do with pkce because that's not something we want to talk about just yet. So let's do the first part first with auth flow. In fact, I'm not going to move the entities for auth code because the browser is part of the entities for auth code. So I'm going to leave that one in, but the others can all move out. And that's them gone. And now there's an element just over here. That's going to be the cloud for auth code flow. So what I'll do there is we'll just come up into the elements here and I'll just crop that out. So we just lose the top part there. So now that's the start of our implicit flow. We want to come down to auth pkce entities, and we're going to move those away as well. So now we just have the elements required for implicit. Implicit does have a couple of other lines here. So there's line 1 and there's line 2 coming in, and then line 3 that's zooming around to bring the API in again. But I've just noticed that this line 3 is still visible at all times. So I'm just going to come down to implicit line 3 there, and I'm going to move that out. So now when we go from implicit 2 to implicit 3, the line kind of comes into place. So in implicit 3, we still want the auth code workflow stuff missing. PKC rather. So we'll take these elements here, not client credentials, just those. I'm going to again make sure that those are off the screen. We want the auth code flow to be missing. and we want our cloud to be cropped. Now that icon there is gone. That's actually part of auth code 9. So I'm just going to do a couple of undos there, and let's just redo that crop. And I'm going to come down and I'm just going to change everything up to 8. So move those out of the way, like so. Auth code 9, there's probably not a lot we can do about that, because if we cropped, we would essentially lose, we'd either still have a bit of an arrow or we'd lose some of the, so I'm just going to leave that as it is. It doesn't matter because we can just refer to the fact that there's the other connection from the server in the background. However, the client credentials final stage and the device flow final stage we do want to move, because we haven't talked about those yet. So let's come down to client creds 3, just this one here, and we'll just move that off. And device 7, and we'll move that off. So now we have our implicit stage 3, but again we need to move the auth code PKCE stuff away. Now I suspect some of this could be done by joining these together. In fact, I'll give it a try. In the past I've often had problems with it. Oh no, it seems to be okay now. Sometimes it'll reset the geometry when you're doing this, and I think it might be because there aren't enough previous keys, frames available to refer to. But I can actually delink those, so that's fine now. So now if we go through from the beginning, we can see the flows coming in. I've got line, line, line. Let's just skip through a few of those up to auth code 8. We've got 9, which brings in that one there. Then we go to implicit start, and everything kind of fades away, and we just have the implicit. And then we get line 1, and we've got line 2, and then we come around to see the third line come into the API. And then we head off to auth code with PKCE view. So in this case here, we've got the lines already hidden, but again, we want to remove potentially some of the information down at the bottom here. So this is causing a little bit of noise still. Arguably, we could leave it in, because auth code flow with PKCE is in some ways an improvement over implicit flow for single page apps and the like. I could leave it in, but I just want to keep a clean slate. So I'm going to come in and find the implicits, which are these here. Now I'm going to leave the entities in though, because the entities are the identity provider and the browser. Oh no, the browser here is part of the others, but this is one of the entities. The cloud is also one of the entities, so we'll see whether we can crop that out. So first things first, we've got those selected. Let's just move those away. In fact, we can't because of that, so instead I'm going to crop them. So they're now cropped out, and in fact we'll go for the entities and we'll crop out the cloud as well. Then we'll come up to auth code 1 through 8, and we're just going to move those out of the way. Auth code entities, we're just going to crop that cloud out. Great. Now this line here, the final connection, I think I'd like that to go. Because we're doing, let's have a look. So at the moment we have auth code PKCE 4, and then we can just make reference to the fact that it still works. Now this here was part of implicit 3, I believe. If I move this, that's that one there, yes. So I think what I'll do is I will move that off to the right just there, and then before I do that, I'm just going to come in at this point here. I want to create a new frame now, because this is going to bring in line 4. I want to bring that one in as an additional frame. So I'll just call this one PKC5. And to all intents and purposes, they're exactly the same, except on 5, this is going to be visible. I'll delink that. And then on this frame here, I'm going to move it out of the way. So now we start off with the flow there. I also want to So it turns out that if you change it in the future frame, it will actually put a new keyframe in. If we put it on the first one here, if we move that, then it doesn't, it flows all the way through. So I've applied that to the first frame in this set here. So now if we step through them, we get line 1, get line 2, line 3, and line 4, and then we bring in from the right the key with a reference to talking to the API again. I wonder whether we try and select all the layers and add in another. I actually want to create links. It's going to break it by default. Okay, let's start again. So what I want to do is I want to zoom out this portion. You know what, I'm just going to leave it. We're just going to make a reference to that. So move over to client start. We need the identity provider and the API. These components over here are part of device flow. So let's hide those. Device 1 through 7. And we'll just move those off. This cloud over here is part of device entities, which I think includes this. So we need to leave that in, but what we will do is we'll crop it. So that's what we see there. Then we get line 1, line 2, and then we zoom out to see the third line being the API coming in here. So again, a lot of this can stay. This is the auth code flow down at the bottom here. Because this element here is part of the cloud, we could actually crop those back. But you know what? I'm going to do that, just to keep it consistent with other places. So let's find our frame. That's this one here. We want to grab the auth code entities, and we're going to crop. Yeah, I'm going to crop all of that out. In fact, auth code entities we completely hide at this point. So rather than putting a crop in here, I'm just going to move that out over there. Same with all the lines. We do need to keep number 9 in though. But number 9, potentially we can crop out that line now. We can just about come in there, and then we've got our implicit 3 in here, which I'm just going to move down a little, and all our device flow stuff we need to move as well. So we'll find the device flow, entities, included the IDP, so on this one here, we're just going to do a crop, and crop the cloud out, and then device 1 through 4, 7. I'm just going to move those away. So there's our client credentials flow. And then we come to device start. So we've got a couple of client credentials flow bits over here. Let's move those out of the way. So client credentials, the cloud, move that away, move that line away, move that line away. And number 3 is the line. We don't need to bother about that because we can't see it. So we get line 1, line 2, we zoom in, come back out, line 3, communication 4, we zoom in and we zoom out, and then there's a request from the mobile to the identity provider, and eventually there's a response back, and then we get our key in there. So at this point here again we want to hide the client credentials information, so let's just find that. So we're over here now, so client credentials, let's just move all of those away, and let's come up to auth code. The only things we can really see are auth code 8 or 9 rather. We need to crop out that line. we can see implicit 3. So we'll just move that line down, and auth code entities, I'm just going to move that away, and then there's probably line 1, there we go. So now we have device flow, and then the final one is everything coming back together in one. So there we have it. The Sozi file is complete, and this is what the final presentation looks like. So here's the opening slide. You can see there's a bit more space at the top and at the bottom, because this is actually a 16 by 10 screen, not 16 by 9. So we might find that a couple of elements bleed in at the top and the bottom. I can always go in and change that later. Let's have a go through it. So as I move with my cursor keys, and this would work with a normal presentation controller as well, we can see all the elements coming in. Unlike in Sozi, where it was a little bit jittery at times, the animations on here are a lot smoother. So the effect is actually quite good. And we'll see as we come in through line 7, line 8, the next one's going to be line 9, so we'll get a bit of a zoom out. There's a little bit of we can see line number 2 on the left hand side here, just showing through during the transition, so I might go in later and clean that up a little more, but for the most part it's looking okay. We've got line 1 in there, and then line 2 showing up, and then we'll zoom out to see line 3, and then from there we go in and look at the auth code flow with PKCE, and we've got line 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we zoom out again. Well, we don't zoom on this one, but we just show that potential connection to the API. We've got client credentials, which zooms out, and we've got, oh, there's a nice mess of lines showing up just in there, so I'll clean that up. But we've got the flow going pretty well here, and the final one, once we get back to this one here, the token goes through to the API, and then we zoom straight out, and there's our closing slide. All in all, I have to say that I've quite enjoyed working with Sozi on this occasion. So thanks for watching. I hope it provides you with some encouragement to give Sozi a try. I'm certainly enjoying using the latest version, and anticipate doing so much more often. So comment below with any links to your Sozi presentations, hit me up for any questions you might have. The videos I make here are for fun. I ask for nothing in return. If you'd like to show your support, simply like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.